You glance out your kitchen window on a quiet, frost-edged Tuesday morning. The world is half asleep, wrapped in a pale, damp mist that clings to the glass. Hanging just beyond the pane, your wooden bird feeder swings gently in the crisp draft, a scatter of sunflower seeds catching the weak morning light. To anyone else, it's a picture of domestic tranquility, a peaceful suburban tableau where harmless, cheerful little creatures drop in for a quick breakfast before the rush of the day. You've watched them 1,000 times. You know their bouncy hops, their soft twitters, the familiar flash of feathers against the gray backdrop of the fence. You think you know who is visiting your yard. You think they're just hungry little bundles of fluff surviving on your charity. Honestly, you're entirely, breathtakingly mistaken, because while you watch them peck casually at a seed, a chilling, invisible drama is playing out right in front of your face. Behind those innocent, bead-like black eyes lies a reality so bizarre, so fiercely calculated, and so alien to our human understanding of nature that if you truly comprehended what was happening just inches from your glass, you would never look at your backyard the same way again. Here's what most people don't realize. We walk through life assuming the creatures sharing our immediate domestic spaces are simple. We believe birds are background noise cute, decorative ornaments of the ecosystem that operate purely on instinct, fluttering from branch to branch with empty heads and gentle hearts. We imagine our yards are safe havens, pastoral sanctuaries where nature exists in a state of harmless grace. The truth is darker, stranger, and honestly, a lot more fascinating than we think. Look closer at the next visitor that lands on your tray. Notice the way its head tilts, not out of curiosity, but out of ballistic calculation. Notice the absolute lack of fear, replaced instead by a cold, calculating assessment of your movements. Beneath those ordinary feathers are organisms that have quietly mastered psychological warfare, espionage, mimicry, and a level of tactical dominance that puts human urban planning to shame. They aren't just visiting your yard, they are managing it. They have mapped every hiding spot, memorized your daily schedule, and turned your expensive store-bought birdseed into a localized geopolitical chess match. And the 5 regular visitors you are about to discover? They are the absolute masters of this hidden underworld. If you strip away the comforting illusion of the suburban garden, you realize you're not actually the owner of your property. You're just a landlord to a covert society of feathered masterminds. Every seed you toss out is currency in an underground economy governed by rules we're only beginning to decode. Once you see the machinery behind the feathers, the illusion shatters for good. You'll start noticing the subtle cues, the calculated silences, the precise choreography of territorial control happening right outside your kitchen. Before we pull back the curtain on these 5 architectural and psychological masterminds, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell too. Trust me, once you see what's actually happening in the trees right above your head, you're going to want to stick around for every bit of this. The feathered psychopath of the perimeter morning light cuts across the garden, catching the frost on the lawn. And then, out of nowhere, every single sparrow and finch at the feeder scatters in blind panic. There's no hawk in the sky, no cat stalking the bushes. The feeding station is just empty, left dead silent. And then this tiny blur drops onto the tray. It weighs barely anything, maybe as much as a few grapes. It's got a neat little black cap, a soft gray back, and this cheerful bubbling call that sounds almost like a music box. Honestly, it looks like a stuffed animal straight out of a storybook. This is the great Titor, one of its really lethal Eurasian cousins anyway, and it's hiding one of the most gruesome secrets in the bird world. To get what happens next, you kinda have to lean in close and forget everything you think you know about what songbirds eat. For 9 months out of the year, they play the polite guest, cracking sunflower seeds and nibbling suet. But the second winter locks everything in ice and regular food just vanishes. Something shifts in their tiny brains. That sweet little singer turns into a calculated nighttime assassin under the cover of pitch-black winter nights, while other small birds and rodents are tucked away in tree hollows or warm wall crevices. This tiny maestro goes hunting. It's not looking for insects, it's hunting warm-blooded vertebrates. Roosting tits, sleeping mice, Exhausted migrants, it flies silently through the freezing dark with total night vision precision. When it spots a sleeping victim, it doesn't hesitate. With surgical accuracy, it drives its needle-sharp beak straight into the skull, cracking the bone like a microscopic pile driver. Then, it carefully extracts the brain, feeding on that high-fat, calorie-dense neural tissue just to survive the sub-zero night. Think about that the next time you watch one delicately wiping its beak on your cedar fence post after eating your morning thistle seed. That polite little tab against the wood? Honestly, it's the exact same biomechanical motion used to shatter bone. Look at the science European behavioral ecologists documented while tracking winter feeder dynamics. When food caches freeze over, these birds completely override their standard foraging pathways. Their spatial memory expands like crazy, letting them map hundreds of hidden caches while instantly shifting their predatory focus to living, moving prey. It's basically a dual operating system running inside a 12-gram body. And here's what makes it terrifyingly fascinating: the impact it has on the rest of your garden. The very birds eating from your hand are operating under a code of ruthless pragmatism. They look at every other creature in the yard through a binary lens, resource or threat. When you fill your feeder, you aren't just feeding wildlife. You're actually subsidizing an apex predator's winter energy budget, keeping a tiny, feathered Hannibal Lecter fat, happy, and living right outside your window. As you watch them dart away into the hedge, ask yourself, what's really going on behind those glossy black eyes? Are they just waiting for the sun to go down? The story stops right there, leaving you to wonder what happens in the shadows once your kitchen lights finally click off. The afternoon breeze picks up, rustling through the dense canopy of the old oak tree near your property line. A low, raspy chatter cuts right through the leaves, a sound so jarringly human and honestly so mechanical that you instinctively turn your head, expecting a neighbor standing on the footpath. Instead, you see nothing. Just a quick flash of slate gray and stark white vanishing deep into the shadows of the branches. You know what just happened? You've basically been audited by a masterclass in psychological manipulation, the northern mockingbird, or its brilliant equivalents in the mimicry network. Most people think birds sing out of pure joyful exuberance. We picture a little opera singer pouring its heart out to greet the dawn. But step into the reality of avian neuroscience, and you realize that what sounds like a sweet morning concert is actually an aggressive, high-stakes campaign of psychological warfare, identity theft, and acoustic terrorism. This bird doesn't even have its own authentic song. Instead, its brain functions like an ultra-sensitive high-fidelity audio recorder hooked up to an advanced synthesis engine. Over its lifetime, a single individual can master up to 200 distinct sounds. We're talking about the alarm calls of competing hawk species, the squeak of a rusty garden gate, car alarms, mobile phone ringtones, and police sirens. Why? Because in the brutal hierarchy of the suburban backyard, psychological dominance is everything. When this master mimic moves in near your feeder, it starts a calculated campaign of sonic deception. Perched high on a television antenna or chimney stack, it doesn't just sing, it broadcasts. It will mimic the shrill, terrifying shriek of a Cooper's hawk, freezing every single chipmunk, dove, and smaller bird in your yard into paralyzed, statue-like terror. While everyone else is locked in a defensive lockdown, frozen under the illusion of an aerial attack, the mimic swoops down unhindered to steal the best perches and the richest seed clusters. It uses fear as a tool of economic control. Ornithological studies using acoustic playback analysis have shown that these birds possess an extraordinary prefrontal processing capacity. They don't just mimic sounds randomly, they catalog them by context, deploying specific predator alarms when rival species crowd the feeding station. It is basically the avian version of psychological projection on a grand scale. Imagine walking into a room where someone is perfectly imitating your voice, your boss's voice, and an approaching siren, all just to keep you off balance while they empty your wallet. That's the daily reality playing out in your maple tree. The bird is hacking the evolutionary programming of every other animal in your neighborhood, bending their fear responses to fit its own survival strategy. And here's the most unsettling part: they never stop listening. Every sound you make in your yard, the clink of your coffee mug, the slam of your back door, the whistle you use to call your dog is being recorded, processed, and filed away into an acoustic database that will eventually be thrown right back at you from the canopy. You think you're observing them. Honestly, you're the one being cataloged. The morning rain left the garden heavy and slick, coating the patio furniture in a sheen of gray moisture. You step out onto the back deck with your steaming mug, looking forward to a quiet moment while the neighborhood flock arrives for breakfast. Instead, you walk right into a tactical battlefield. Two small, fiercely belligerent birds, stout-bodied, russet brown with aggressive cocktails, are locked in a high-velocity dogfight just inches from your head. They aren't playing. They're engaged in a merciless, calculated war of attrition over the prime real estate of your hanging suet cage. These are Eurasian wrens and their territorial cousins, creatures whose tiny size is totally inversely proportional to their staggering militaristic fury. We love to romanticize territory in nature. We picture birds peacefully sharing branches, singing cheerful duets across a garden fence. But if you map out the microgeography of a suburban backyard, you find a mosaic of blood-soaked, fiercely contested microstates. Every fence slat, every overhanging wire, and every single port on your bird feeder is claimed, defended, and fought over with calculated brutality. When a new pair of wrens stakes out a territory, they don't just build one nest. They build multiple fake dummy nests across the entire perimeter, not to use but purely to deceive and exhaust rivals. They do deliberate, preemptive sabotage. If a competing species dares to build a nest in a nearby shrub, the male wren will sneak over during a quiet interval and puncture every single egg with microscopic precision, leaving the shell intact so the parents waste precious days sitting on unhatchable blanks. It is demographic warfare executed with cold-blooded efficiency. Behavioral biologists studying urban territorial dynamics have noticed that these birds possess an acute understanding of resource geometry. They calculate the exact carrying capacity of your feeder, mapping out optimal flight paths and blind spots to ambush intruders. When a larger bird, like a mourning dove or a jay, tries to land, the wrens don't rely on physical strength. They use synchronized mobbing tactics, launching kamikaze-style aerial strikes right at the face and eyes of the interloper until the giant retreats in confusion. Just think about the sheer audacity required. A bird weighing less than an ounce will routinely face down creatures 10 times its size, not out of panic, but through calculated tactical intimidation. They run your yard like an organized crime syndicate collecting protection fees and seed. And the most fascinating twist? They know you are watching. They have factored human presence right into their tactical calculations. They realize that your presence on the deck deters larger cats and hawks, creating an artificial safety bubble that they exploit with absolute impunity. They use you as a human shield. As you sip your coffee and watch them aggressively chase a much larger intruder away from your patio, just remember who is actually running security in your garden. You literally just pay the rent. They write the laws. The afternoon sun cuts long amber shadows across the mulch bed beneath your hedges. A deep, rhythmic scratching sound rises from the dead leaves, scritch, pause, scritch-like, someone raking dry paper with invisible fingernails. You lean over the railing to look, expecting a field mouse or maybe a stray neighborhood cat. Instead, a sturdy, speckled-breasted bird bursts from the leaf litter, throwing mulch everywhere with violent, coordinated sweeps of its powerful legs. This is the song thrush, though its name doesn't really capture its true nature. It isn't just a singer, it is an industrial alchemist operating a high-precision cracking operation right in your flower beds. To watch a thrush interact with your garden is to watch an ancient, unchanging manufacturing process. While other birds peck lazily at soft surfaces, the thrush treats the ground like a subterranean vault. It has an auditory system so hypersensitive that it can actually hear the microscopic hydraulic movement of earthworms shifting through damp soil inches below the surface. Once it locks onto a target, the bird doesn't just pull. It executes a precise biomechanical strike, snapping the worm out of the earth with a lightning-fast tug that leverages its entire body weight. But the true genius and the darker side of its routine shows up when it encounters armored prey, like garden snails. Snails are walking fortresses, totally immune to standard pecking. Most birds just ignore them. Not the thrush. It hops purposefully across the lawn until it finds a specific, flat stone embedded in the soil, an ancient anvil that it has meticulously selected, cleaned, and dedicated solely to execution. Gripping the shell of the snail in its beak, the thrush rears back and brings it down against the stone with explosive force, shattering the calcium armor in a single, practiced blow. It repeats this rhythm with mechanical precision until the shell is completely pulverized, extracting the soft flesh inside. If you walk your garden paths after a morning rain, you'll find the silent evidence of this macabre workshop: little piles of shattered iridescent shell fragments scattered around designated stone anvils. It is an archaeological site of avian industry operating right outside your kitchen window. Ornithological researchers studying tool use and foraging efficiency have discovered that thrushes actually pass down these specific anvil locations across generations. Young thrushes spend weeks watching adults, learning not just how to strike, but how to select stones of the exact mass, texture, and elevation required to maximize kinetic energy transfer. It is a culture of tool utilization hidden in plain sight. You walk past those stones every single day on your way to check the mail, thinking they're just random garden debris or broken pottery. In reality, you are walking through an industrial zone managed by an expert stonebreaker. The bird pauses mid-scratch, its head snapping sideways to lock its eye directly onto yours. It doesn't flinch, it just stares with an ancient, calculating intelligence, as if evaluating whether your skull would fit on its anvil. You take an involuntary half-step back from the railing. The illusion of peaceful domesticity just cracked a little bit more. Section 5. The Mastermind of the Wire. The evening sky starts turning this bruised, dark violet. The neighborhood finally quiets down as the birds head back to the dense evergreens. You step out onto the back lawn just to catch the last bit of light, figuring the garden's totally empty and left to the stillness of the night. And then you spot a silhouette sitting completely still on the high-voltage power line cutting across your yard. It's a crow or a Eurasian jay. Honestly, one of those shadowy, brilliant relatives, and it's definitely not just resting. It's basically running an evening security briefing. To most people, corvids are just regular pests, noisy black shapes cluttering up telephone poles. But once you actually look at how these birds think, it completely shatters the idea that human intelligence is the only kind that matters. They don't just exist in your yard, they understand it in 4 dimensions. Think about what happens when you walk outside. To a sparrow, you're just this giant, blurry shape. But to a crow, you're an individual. You've been cataloged, assessed, and remembered. Controlled studies by behavioral neuroscientists have actually proven that corvids can recognize faces almost as well as we can. They don't just see humans, they know specific human faces. They hold grudges, and get this, they teach their babies which humans are safe and which ones are threats. If you shoo a crow away once, that exact bird will remember your face for years, passing your profile down through generations like an inherited criminal record. Plus, they have this weird clockwork understanding of our schedules. They know the exact minute you leave for work. They know the exact window when you fill the bird feeder, usually hanging out in the high branches of the neighbor's sycamore tree, watching you twist the lid off with crazy precision. The second you step back inside, they drop down in a calculated, organized rotation, completely clearing out the tray before any other species even figures out food is there. They talk to each other using this complex, multi-layered syntax that researchers are barely starting to decode: dialects, warnings, tactical coordinates, and neighborhood gossip bouncing back and forth. They're basically running a tiny intelligence agency right above your roof. Look back up at that silhouette on the wire. It tilts its head, catching the last glint of the sun in its dark obsidian eye. It lets out this single, sharp, caw-not random noise, but a status update broadcast across the whole invisible grid of the neighborhood. And it all clicks. You realize your entire yard, every seed you throw out, every flower you plant, every move you make, is being monitored, analyzed, and logged into a behavioral database by creatures whose brains operate on a totally different frequency. The garden isn't yours. You're just this unpredictable, clumsy giant living inside theirs. Build up. The sun finally dips below the horizon, and the yard settles into a deep, velvety darkness. The bird feeder swings gently in the wind, casting long, skeletal shadows across the wooden deck. For the longest time, we thought we owned our domestic spaces, that our backyards were just simple, passive paintings built for our relaxation. But the truth has been right there the whole time. Disguised in feathers and masked by innocent morning visits, the illusion is totally gone now. You step back toward the sliding glass door, your hand hovering over the lock, suddenly super aware of the dark canopy rustling just past the glass. And then, in the total silence of the night, a sharp metallic tap 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 echoes right against the window pane next to your head. You freeze. Your breath catches in your throat. You slowly turn your head to look at the glass. There's nothing there, just the faint, distorted reflection of your own wide, startled eyes staring back from the dark. And from somewhere deep in the shadows of the yard, a single, knowing call cuts through the cold air. They're still out there, and they're watching you right back. Tomorrow morning, when you pour your first cup of coffee and look out at the frosted lawn, the feeder will be swinging in the pale light. The little feathered visitors will drop in, hopping cheerfully from branch to branch. And as you watch them, the old routine is completely broken. You finally know who's actually running your world. Which of these hidden backyard visitors surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts below.